What is that?
So he's not muted.
Oh, I don't. He is muted, yeah.
So that's muted.
Mark, your mic is muted. Can you hear us?
Mark, are you out there?
I'll send him a message.
I guess we could move on down to department head discussion, because I don't see the sheriff here either.
I was just gonna state, with the election tomorrow, with healthcare facilities, a resident's rights, including the right to vote, must not be impeded by any way by the healthcare facility and its facility staff. County auditors and their staff should collaborate with healthcare facility staff to ensure the rights of the healthcare facility residents are not impeded. There was one healthcare that did not want to allow our bipartisan team in on Friday, so talked to the Secretary of State, their legal counsel got in touch with them, and they were able to get in, but I just wanted to let you guys know in case anyone says anything.
Okay. Any other comments from fellow supervisors? Okay, is there anything else, department head discussion from anybody? Hearing none. Do you think Mark is on now? Mark, are you there?
I'm here now, yeah.
All right, Mark, you have the floor.
The only thing I have is, I put on there discussed with Stan Walk, the decision by the IP board. I know this doesn't really affect the Board of Supervisors directly, but indirectly it affects all of us. Because when I see somebody in public, I get a lot of comments. Well, I see Stan Walk wanting the case against economic development. He posted on Facebook that he won, and it's like, well, if Stan Walk considered that the board dismissed his case winning, then I guess he won, but there's nothing farther from the truth. They dismissed his claim. He's claiming that it's harmless error. That's not what the decision said. The decision clearly said that economic development did not violate the Open Meetings Act, the Public Documents Act. It just can't be clearer. They go on and make some other comments, and then they say, even if they did violate it, it was harmless error. They never said they violated it, but it was harmless error. So, if anybody wants a copy of that decision, just call our office, 732-5727. I'll be glad to email you a copy. Give us your email address, and everyone can read it and make their own decision. But nothing could be farther from the truth. When they dismissed his case, they just said it's dismissed. His complaint does not have any validity. If he wants to claim that as a victory, that's fine. But his complaint's over. It's done with. It's not going any farther. There was no sanctions, no penalties whatsoever to the Economic Board. So I just wanted you to be aware that if people are asking, why did you Stan Walk says he won? Well, if that's his definition of a win, I'll take that 100 times out of 100. So Jerry Balkers always used to say it's better to win ugly than to lose pretty. And so I'll take the victory every time. Other than that, I had to get a preliminary lien search done on the Kephart property because when we file that nuisance lawsuit, we have to name everybody who has a judgment against him. I got that preliminary lien search back Thursday or Friday of next week, so I anticipate that lawsuit will probably get filed Tuesday or Wednesday, and then we'll go from there on that.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Does anybody have any questions for Mark? All right, Mark.
If they didn't catch my number, 732-5727, that's the Mitchell County Attorney's Office number. I'll be glad to email anybody who wants a copy of the opinion, a copy of the opinion. Read it for yourself and make your own decision.
All right, Mark, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't see the sheriff here yet, so we'll slide down to county engineer update.
Morning.
Good morning, Rich.
First off, I brought in Brent Chapman. He's the new employee we hired for roadside manager, and I guess since we haven't appointed weed commissioner yet, the soon-to-be weed commissioner, I assume. Right now, he's working with Austin to get your guys' weed report done for the year. I put it on the agenda for next week, so that.
Okay.
But this is Brent. Got any questions you might want to ask or anything? That's
Nope.
fine. Otherwise, I just wanted to welcome.
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 Thank you.
What part of the county you live in?
Central, north. I live up on the Patterson Cedar Road,
Okay,
8 mile off 218.
okay.
So anyway, just thought I'd bring him in so you guys had a face to go with the name, and I don't know when you guys want to do any appointments right now. If Austin is still the weed commissioner yet, I think is legally, he's been appointed. I don't think he's been moved off of that, so they're working on the report, like I said, and then.
I got my papers filed for 2022 and stuff like that.
So. Anyway.
Sometime before then,
Okay.
So I'm faced with the name, and now he knows what you guys look like. So. I'm going to start off with the sheets that I handed out to you this morning. It's the Hickory Kirkwood farm to market balances. So the first sheet you're looking at is where we sit right now. The projects are programmed with farm to market funds. And so if we use farm to market funds, and then off to the right, you see a bunch of other notes, and there's dollar figures that show what we would need to use outside of farm to market funds to maybe get projects going. But there's red text under there that says that we won't be using federal aid or safety funds or any state funds for those projects. And then those dollar amounts on the right-hand side where it says withdrawn are more than 30%. There's borrowing restrictions for the farm to market account. So I guess the takeaway on this first sheet is we'll have a difficult time letting projects if we leave these in the farm to market account and the program's set the way it is now with projects programmed without really having to throw a lot of money back into the farm to market account with local dollars. So on the very bottom, you'll see on the very bottom underneath those miscellaneous where there's 3.697 million. That's the money we would have to come up with through the next 5 years to do any projects in the farm to market account if they let us borrow or if they let us do projects, because right now the way this is set up, it violates any of the borrowing restrictions that we have. So the borrowing restrictions are the county can borrow ahead. A county borrow ahead less than 2 years may let an FM project if the FM obligations do not exceed 3 years after the project is let. So you'll see on the very right-hand side of the chart itself, the numbers in red are anything under or borrowed ahead from year zero. So we're not. And so I've adjusted some of these projects to at least meet the 3 years where we have a negative 3 years, but that's where it shows previously we're borrowed more than 2 years in advance. So they would look at that first and say, well, are you borrowed 2 years in advance? And you can take a look at the Balsam project and say, yes, we were borrowed at 2.4 years in advance, but because that project, Balsam Avenue, actually has state aid in it or swap funding, we would be able to let that project as is. But if we wanted to do March Avenue and Orchard, we would still be borrowed more than 2 years in advance. And we would be violating the 2 years. So then it says a county borrowed ahead 2 years or more, but less than 5, may let an FM project if all of the following conditions are met. Well, one condition is you use federal aid, state aid, or safety funds. Well, right away we're not using federal aid, state aid, or safety funds. But also, if we were, we would still have to say that the project costs wouldn't exceed 30%. The farm to market account wouldn't provide more than 30% of the cost to the project. So even failing on item 1, we wouldn't probably look beyond that. And then item 2 is if the county has borrowed ahead more than 3.5 years, it may not incur any FM obligations until we meet the requirements above. So this first sheet says, look, we'll have trouble if we borrow and use FM funds for these projects. So the second sheet then would show what if we adjusted our programming, if we still kept those projects in the farm to market account. And these are running some rough numbers. Keep in mind that what it doesn't show on here is any bridge projects we do, they use our farm to market account to borrow, and then they reimburse it. But what they do is they still use that against us when they look at the 3-year borrow ahead terms. It's kind of goofy how they do it, and I don't like doing it that way, but I have to. So I didn't include those numbers. This was just straight roadway projects and FM. So on the second sheet, it says, okay, well, if we leave these in here, we have to, now I've pushed, other than Balsam, I couldn't push back, and that still stays the same as far as being able to use federal aid because we're using our swap funds. So next year, the fiscal 23 project Balsam can be paved, but everything beyond that, we would have to push back a year to get the projects to fit within the constraints of the farm to market borrowing. So basically, we have to kick the can down the road on every other project for at least a year. And this doesn't include any projects where we might see that a road might need to be advanced or adding new projects because we wouldn't have the funding to do that. So if we needed to advance a project, we couldn't because we'd violate those borrowing restrictions again. Because if you look at the borrow ahead, we're always at least 2 years borrowed in advance, and so we would have to try to match our borrowing restrictions. So still able to do the projects, it's just that we would always be pushing that 3-year borrow ahead, and there wouldn't be a lot of cushion for anything. And then the last one is if we were to just straight up leave the farm to market account as it is, use local funding for Hickory and Kirkwood, and then all of our projects can be let. Plus, we have a year accumulation of we're always kind of in the black on the accumulated years, so there's always a little bit of cushion in there that if we'd had a project come up, we could still borrow 3 years in advance till we get down to fiscal year 26. And of course, everything in here is subject to be moved around and whatnot, but it keeps our balances in a more manageable position for projects that might come up in the future. Now you look at and say on the bottom where it says 4.75 million, that's local funds. That includes, the million that the secondary road fund would contribute also. So it's not much different than what the first sheet would show where we're going to need 3.697 million. But keep in mind the 3.697 million is trying to figure out how to borrow every fiscal year to do projects versus a one-time local borrow. So I know it's kind of confusing to you guys. It's confusing trying to put this together, but I think I've got a good handle on where the farm to market account sits for the next few years. And in my opinion, this is just my opinion because you guys are the ones that need to kind of dictate where the funding comes from, but I think it's better to borrow one time now while we have the money than to try to do this every year for the next, who knows? I mean, this is only till fiscal 26, but it's a continuing process until we either don't do projects for a year so we can build up the farm market account, or we just keep borrowing money. So my suggestion is to use local funding on the projects. I mean, we would still contribute our $1 million like we said we would if we can still fit it into the program. So we'd be looking at the remaining funds of, 3.6 or whatever from TIF or whatever you guys would like to use. But I guess it's kind of up to you guys. And if we do the local money, that gives us an advantage to letting. We can do a local letting, and we can not have to follow the DOT's timelines for lettings, because right now we'd be looking at March, maybe April for a letting. So, but if we use local, we can get this done in a couple months for letting. So, but I don't know where the funding sets. It sounded to me like there was funds available, but there was also conversations you wanted to have with the financial advisor or whatever. So that's just where I'm at right now. And the borrowing restrictions are they won't let us get more than 3 years in advance. So if we have projects that put us 3 years in advance, we have to reimburse the farm to market fund in order to stay solvent in that fund.
So in a nutshell, you're saying that if we use farm to market funds, it's gonna affect all future projects?
Yes.
Okay.
Whether we keep them in the program or we push them back.
Okay.
When you go into the red in the farm to market, is there interest or fees?
No,
Incurred?
but
So
just,
it's
there's,
like-
actually, the way the farm to market account was originally set up, we could borrow 5 years in advance, but the way the funding comes in and goes out, it's a state thing, it's a federal thing, where maybe not a federal, but it's a state thing, and that farm to market, the state farm to market account has to stay solvent. And so the way the money comes in and the projects go out, we can, I don't know when the last time we were ever able to borrow 5 years in advance.
Yeah.
It's
So it's 3 years now.
This memo came out in 2015 where they restricted us to 3 years borrow ahead, but even before then, I'm not sure whether we were even 5 years borrowed ahead back in 2015.
Yeah.
I think they kind of, I don't know if they changed any of the requirements, but that's history. Right now, we're stuck with a 3-year borrow ahead.
Yeah.
And so,
But there's
anything
no-
that takes us out of that 3-year borrow ahead, we gotta pony up the cash to do the projects.
Yep. So it's
So-
kind of, you know, if you can borrow ahead and don't have to pay no interest or fees, it's a tool that could be used, you know.
Well, sure it is, but
Yeah.
you gotta go
Yeah,
through a
I'm just-
process to extract the money every year if you wanna do it that way.
well, I'm just-
And
did
it
some-
doesn't give us any room for, say, if a road falls apart
Right.
prematurely and we wanna fix it, we don't have that capability, or we start moving projects around.
But if it did, then we could borrow at that point too, you know, I mean, if it's.
I did some
That's
math
always
on
gonna
what
be there.
we've done as far as what Foothill cost us to do per mile, and then I added the estimates that you gave us for Hickory and Kirkwood, and computed that, what it is per mile to do those
Mhm.
combined. We did Foothill at $340,000 a mile.
Mhm.
The Hickory and Kirkwood projects are estimated to cost $950,000 a mile. That's, to me, is ridiculous that we're doing that, but I've accepted that we will do that, but I'm not gonna accept that we have to sacrifice future projects and future roads for other people because we're building these roads this way. I don't think that's right. That's a ridiculous amount of money that we're putting into roads. So I'm not gonna vote for borrowing any FM funds to do this. If we can find money other than TIF, that's great. That's the only one that I know of, but if we have some other ways to do it, I'd entertain that, because I don't like to have to borrow money either, but I'm not gonna support clicking into the FM fund.
And those costs are high, but we're also widening these a little bit more, which we didn't do on Foothill. So, I mean, and I know that was kind of an issue too, where we've got a road that's already kind of the right width. These other roads are a little bit narrower, so we gotta do a little bit of extra work. And keep in mind, these are estimates at
Yeah.
900. Hopefully,
And-
they're a lot less than that, but.
Saying that, though, it's also 3-foot shoulders.
Mhm.
Foothill at a 4-foot shoulder. We're building these at a 3-foot shoulder.
Just to keep them in the right
And I
order.
measured Kirkwood. A lot of it measures 21 feet, so we're pretty much just widening 1 foot of road and paying $950,000 miles to do that.
To keep the existing profile too.
It's
We gotta keep the existing
It's a lot of
profile
money.
to keep, you're right. To
Yep.
keep the existing profile, we gotta bring the road down, so it means removing the old road. Or buy right away and add another X amount of dollars to the project, so.
that's
We
my
skinnied the
thoughts.
project down, I know, Jim, and I know it's a lot of money. We skinnied the project down to reduce those costs. And granted, these are just
Estimate.
engineer estimates, and hopefully the numbers are a lot better than that when they let them, but,
Or they could go up.
or they could go up, you're right. But I guess the whole thing behind these projects were, I guess, the requests were, we need a wider road, we need you know,
Yeah.
so completely widening things and giving them a better road. The roads are not good, they need work. So, I guess prior, the board said, let's widen the road, and let's get a good road put back in, and the costs are high, so. I guess the question is, what do you wanna do? We've got, the design is could be near completion. I mean, the cross sections are all set. They just haven't put plans out yet because we're kind of waiting to see which direction we need to go as far as funding goes.
You know, and then there's the federal infrastructure that's gonna come at some point, and that could probably cover some of these other projects, you know, depending on how much it is and when it is.
Depending on how much it is and when it is
Right,
and if
right.
it is. and-
Is the federal infrastructure, are they talking additional funding or just trying to keep
No.
this current funding? Because I haven't been paying attention.
It's
to that.
additional funding, from what I understand. And it's supposed to trickle down to the county level, you know? From what
Well, I know, Reynolds put another, 200 million into infrastructure. But I don't know if that's, I haven't looked into it, I think she just did that last week. You know, she gave out, I think there was 100 million that she gave out for broadband and infrastructure, and now last week, she put in another 200 million, but I just heard that on the radio. I haven't looked into it. I don't know what's
Yeah, I have.
gonna be for.
I wait for our association to kind of tell us, because by the time we get it, then we know
Right.
what's,
now it's being delayed again for
Yeah.
some reason. They're
not
trying to-
guessing. When they give us the information, then they know for sure, so.
Well, I don't know. I guess I think if you can borrow money from farm to market without paying interest or fees, why would you wanna borrow money on your own and pay the interest and fees? And you can always do that down the road if needed, you know? I mean, if it ain't needed at this point, then,
But it also means kicking the can down the road and pushing projects back.
and that's happened before.
Well, not to the extent where we push things every project. I mean, we can. I mean, that's
No,
certainly an
but-
option, but it's.
But I mean, then you can, you can TIF at that point if you need to, but if it ain't necessary
Will it be
now,
available then?
Huh?
Will it be available then? I mean,
It's available for the next how many years? Up to what? How many years is it, Rachel? You can do TIF, up to 20?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Talked to Heidi the other day about certification stuff, and the question I had asked just was if you were to tip this project. And she said there's money available and that you can, first 2 or 3 years. I was asking the process, because I
Yeah.
hadn't been we've done refunding, but does Rich need to do something on his end first? Does the board do something? How does that work? And she said for the first 2 or 3 years, you can kind of make it however you want. So if you want to make it a couple of just interest payments, lower, in 3, 4 years, we're gonna have a lot of extra money in our TIF funds, because that's when all 3 of the towers are gonna be together. So by 2024, I'd like to think that we'd have a lot paid off. So the option's available, and there's money going to be available.
is there, I guess I wasn't quite sure, wasn't there money now available that's not borrowed, or is there?
Heidi at one time said there was 5 million that was available that we could use.
That it doesn't have interest is it solvent now, or is it still you're borrowing it?
The way I'd understand, we'd have to purchase a GO bond for it.
Okay, I wasn't quite sure if it was that our payments were exceeding the income, or our income was exceeding the payments, so there was a surplus of money that's available.
well, I think there is in that TIF fund, but I don't think you can take out of that. That has to go towards the payments, correct? And once that fund gets above what you owe, then it'll wipe it out. Right?
Once you get to what you've certified.
Right, yep.
Yep, then it goes back to tax.
I think you have to create debt in order to use it,
Right.
buy a bond, use it.
And if we go FM, we're on the DOT schedule.
Any other comments? Any good thoughts?
But these 2 roads definitely do need repair, so if we don't do it right, how would you recommend to do it? Do it at a lesser cost?
Resurface, well, I don't wanna go back to, I mean, we decided that we're gonna do it this way. Initially, we could have redone them just the way we do every other road, where we resurface it either with an asphalt overlay or we resurface it with a concrete overlay. And the road is the way it is as far as its width. That's the way it's always been, and that's the way we would have done it. We decided not to do that, and.
We
so now-
decided to widen it, and that's where the process kicked in.
So now we're going to pay for it heavily, and I don't want other projects to suffer because of the way we're doing these.
But if we resurface it the way it is, it's gonna be too narrow.
Legal width is 20 feet, so it's not
Right.
like it's illegal road.
Yeah.
No,
But
not-
it was originally a gravel road that somebody wanted to have surfaced, and we macadammed it and put a surface on it so that it was a hard surface, and from there it's evolved into an asphalt paved road. And through time, it's evolved to the way it is. We want it wider, we're making it even better than the way it was. That's okay, but we have to pay for it, and I don't want other projects to have to suffer because of it.
But I'd like a pretty decent road, a wider one.
And that's
'cause
okay.
It gets a lot of traffic.
And that is true, that road takes a lot of traffic, and I know that in the past, we compared it to the Falk Quarry Road, and in fact, if the quarry wasn't, I mean, most of the traffic on the Falk Road is truck traffic, and this road, Kirkwood in particular, doesn't have a quarry on it, and it takes almost as much traffic.
I'm not in any way saying not to do them or not to improve them, because they do need to be improved. I agree with that. But I don't want other projects to suffer because of what we're doing with them. That's my statement.
I think we did come down a little bit and
Oh, yeah.
widen them, right?
Yeah,
From-
we've restricted, we aren't gonna replace the culverts are, we kept the ditch elevations where they're at now because there really isn't a drainage problem, so that eliminated a lot of the driveway culvert replacements and a lot of the dirt work that has to happen. I mean, pushing the road and making it wider, there's a little dirt work, not as much. We made it 3-foot shoulders so we could fit it in the right of way, so we're not gonna buy right of way. And so we're gonna get a little bit better top and a little bit harder, a different surface. I think what we're doing is gonna give us a road that's gonna last a long time. It's just like Jim said, you gotta pay for it. And we've done projects in the past where it's been cheaper to pave roads, and Foothill being one of them, we didn't spend as much money per mile. But when you have the existing width and base and everything there already, it's a lot easier to do a project cheaper, and sometimes it's just, if we're gonna do something and improve something drastically like we are, it costs more money. And I'm hoping that the costs are higher than what we're gonna see, but you can't guarantee that. And so, a lot of times engineers put estimates together that they're hoping are a little bit high, so we get a better price, or, so that we aren't super surprised in the end, but,
These
Yeah.
costs, is that asphalt or concrete or?
right now, they're at 7-inch concrete pavement. Asphalt's not gonna, I don't think asphalt's gonna change the pricing that much.
Probably not with the price of crude barrel.
And that's probably more volatile than a concrete price is, just by the oil prices, so. But we don't know that, it's just a guessing game.
When I look at it, if we can get 30 to 40 years out of it, concrete versus what?
Well, we can get a lot of years out of the asphalt, it's just that typically, without maintenance, whether you do a mill or something in 15 or 20 years, because the road surface is gonna oxidize, and historically, we haven't always been able to afford maintenances like fog seals or crack sealing, we haven't done a lot of that, so over time, the asphalt will degrade, and you'll need to stick money back into it. And then typically on our concrete roads, we haven't put a lot of maintenance into those either, obviously, because we've got wide joints and I don't know, it seems like maintenance is always one of those things that should do, but you can't always afford to do it, or you can't hardly, you have a hard time justifying doing it. So in the long run, when you look at the roads, west out of Stacyville and the Falk Quarry Road, how old those roads are and how little we put into them over the years, they're not the best roads, but they're still a hard surface road, and they're still functioning rather well. They're not wheel rutted, they're rough and they're cracked, but for the most part, and they're 40-some years old. So now we're looking at sticking some money into them just to kind of keep them in a decent shape, not best shape, but decent. So yeah, there's different ways to go, and I guess just based on our history with asphalt, in 15 or 20 years, we're gonna have to do a surface treatment of some sort.
Is there a way to get these costs closer, rather than a big ballpark figure? Can you narrow them down closer or not?
I can go through and try to use DOT numbers and past history, but I don't know if it's gonna change much. They have their own, a lot of times we'll use DOT bid numbers, and they're statewide numbers, and they're averaged through projects, and we look at, if you use those, they've got a high and a low and an average, and then we look at the quantities that we have on our projects, and if you got a small quantity, usually the price is higher. If it's a larger quantity, then you're more toward the average or the low end. So they go through this, and as far as mobilization, nobody knows what that's gonna be. Survey costs, nobody really knows. You can get ballpark, and these are the closest ballpark figures we can find. I personally expect they'll be lower, but you just never know. Depends on how hungry the market is for work. And we do talk a lot about Kirkwood, but Hickory is also narrow, and there's a lot of truck traffic coming up to the elevator that way, so. But I guess we would really like to know, I'd like to know what we're gonna do funding-wise, so we can get the consultant and say, look, this is what we're gonna do. And if it says, if the board's gonna say we're gonna use the TIF money, and now we're using TIF one time and not every year trying to borrow, it's a one-time deal. Now we're hopefully done borrowing money if we can keep the farm to market account solvent, then we can proceed and try to get things really moving along, instead of if we go farm to market, now we're, like I said, waiting on the DOT schedule to make sure we can. They've already been submitted once through the DOT, but we're redoing these, so now we gotta kinda go through the check plan process again.
So our future road projects, are they that tough?
Pardon?
Do you believe they're that rough, bad a shape where they couldn't be held back?
I don't know what Mother Nature's gonna do to us. You know, we've pushed balsam back enough, and all these roads on here are asphalt roads, except for when we get down to fiscal 26, and then March Avenue and Orchard are concrete, but they're limited. But I mean, asphalt, you know, once we degrade it, I don't know, it just all depends. Just like Foothill, when we advanced Foothill, we didn't think it was gonna fall apart as fast as it did, and then we went through one winter and it was looking like we needed to jump on it before it got too bad, so.
So you're looking for an answer then, whether we will.
If you don't wanna, and that's fine, if you guys wanna think about this another week or whatever, but it would be nice to be able to,
I'd like to
have a direction.
I'd like to do a little more research on it, if that's okay.
Yeah, and if you-
Myself, for another week.
And ask me questions too,
Yeah.
because we've
And I-
never been in a situation where we're getting to the farm market account where we're borrowing ahead.
Yeah, yeah.
When I called the local systems engineer who manages the farm to market account, it was, as long as you don't exceed 3 years, we can probably do projects, but you've gotta reimburse that farm to market account the money so that you're not overextended in your farm to market account. And to do that, we have to borrow money, because I don't know the secondary road fund has enough money to put in toward these projects, that somehow we have to use local money, whether we have it on hand or borrow it. Are we gonna borrow it every year now to keep the projects moving, or do we kick all the projects down a year and hope they hold together before we get to them?
Yeah.
And that might, I don't wanna exaggerate and say hope that they don't fall apart, because we're gonna try to maintain them best we can, but
Yeah.
the sooner we repair them,
Right.
a lot of times the sooner you get to them, the cheaper the costs are, but it just all depends, and if they fall apart faster than we think. We don't know what, each winter is always different on our roads, and,
So how often do you get that swap money? Swap,
the swap.
the swap or whatever?
Is that so you're looking at Balsam,
Yeah.
where that has swap money, and now we're
Yeah.
we'll be borrowed ahead on our swap funds we get it every year, but it's
You get
like
some every year.
$100,000 a year, it's not a whole
Okay.
lot of money, and so I end up trying to stockpile, and maybe every 5 years we can use some of that money to do a project, but it's never enough to do a whole project
Right.
unless
Just
they want us to build, you know. Or you borrow ahead in there, and we're borrowed ahead in that swap fund.
you are, okay. Is that a state or?
It used to be federal aid,
Okay.
and when we got the swap funding, now it's state money. We gave our federal money to the state gives us their state money, so that we don't have to go through all the red tape like they do, so.
Okay.
But it hasn't changed how much money we get and how often we can use it.
Okay. Is there any other places you get money from, just the farm to market and that, and?
Farm to market, the swap funding, and then road use tax.
Road use
And then
tax.
whatever local we get, but I know I've explained before, our local tax dollars, our property tax, the money, what we bring in basically covers payroll. So we
Yeah.
do a lot of everything. I mean,
Yeah.
the money gets shifted around enough, but when you look at what the tax dollars come in and what payroll is going out, forget about that. Now we have farm to market and road use tax money to deal with.
Okay, yeah.
All right.
So if we can, let's sit on this for a week, guys, but, I remember months and months ago that people were saying that these two roads have been on the radar for years and years and years, and the price is just gonna keep going up. So I look at it as either we're gonna have to do it, find the money, or next year we'll be doing the same thing and it'll be $1 million a mile, you know. I don't wanna pay that much either, but we keep putting these roads, and the board previous kept putting them on back burner, and I think if we wanna get them done, it's not gonna get any cheaper.
Well, we've got a lot invested in the design already. Now, I'm not saying that, well, okay, so if we forget about the design and whatever we spend in engineering fees, well, that's, consider that a loss, and it's still, you know, if we can find a cheaper model to do something, and well, then that's a write-off. But I guess I don't know. I guess I feel we've got money invested in the design, and whether you agree with the design originally, I know, Jim, you don't agree with it, but at the time it was, we need to widen the roads, so we went whole hog and redesigned it for a wider road, because that's the direction I had at the time. So that's what it took to do it. Now, if you guys want to change things, keep in mind, we still owe a consultant money yet that we don't have an agreement for, that they've done work for. So there's a substantial amount of money we owe yet for the design that we're currently working on. If you guys want to bail on that, we still owe them money and go with, I don't know, a full depth reclamation and an overlay. That's fine, but it's not going to make the road right, not going to make the traveling portion much wider than it is now. And I think the demand was, from the board getting the calls, was they wanted a wider road to drive on. And so whether or not we yield to the demands and say, well, this is all we can afford, we're going to keep this narrow road, it's probably not a good idea to keep the road as narrow as it is, even though it's a legal width. With the traffic that's on it, it would make sense to help make it a little bit safer than it is. But that's, you know,
No.
we can go any direction. It's just that we've got a lot invested now already.
I'm good with what we've agreed that we're going to do.
Okay.
And I've just made that clear, though. I don't want to sacrifice future projects to do it.
And I think,
That's my point.
in my opinion right now, and I know you've got issues with interest and everything else, but a one-time deal here, and I'm not saying we won't have to borrow money for roads in the future, but based on what I've seen here, we're good for quite a few years before we have to think about borrowing, unless something catastrophic happens and we've got to do some other things. We can still adjust projects, you know, a lot of these projects now. The only project I'm considering might changing would be the monument coming into Stacyville, and we could still increase the cost of that project and still keep our farm to market solvent for the next 4 or 5 years, and then we can evaluate projects then also. But to me, it seems easier for a one-time find the money now than to each year. So now we're going to find this money, and then where are we going to find the money next, and things like that. I'm not trying to make things look bad, but it just seems like if we do it now, then we're, you know, kind of like 10, 11 years ago when they TIFed for all the other roads. It was one time on our farm to market account was able to take care of all the other roads. We borrowed one time, granted it was a substantial amount of money in TIF. They did it once, well, twice, because they had, whatever. We did it one time, and then for the next 10 years, we were able to manage our own money and be able to do the projects we needed to do. Now we're in a situation again where we're looking at, because of where we decided to go with these two roads, that we need to borrow the money. So you could always make the projects cheaper or not, but like, we're here. This is where we're at. This is the direction we had. So in my mind, and that's just me, that's my opinion, is it's kinda easier to do this one time, and then with the next few years, we're flexible in our farm to market account for any projects coming up. So maybe you just wanna absorb what you have here and ask me questions later on through the week. That's fine too.
I'm good with waiting until next week and give a decision.
Okay.
As soon as we get going on it,
Yeah.
the sooner we get it.
Correct.
I'm like Jim, I think we should go with what we've got.
Yes.
What you've done. The only thing of it is I don't wanna use TIP. And I think we can come up with a way to do, you know, them roads up there have been pushed back for years. And some of these other roads could maybe be held off another year or two, and we could get away with it. That's just my thought. That's the way I think. I'm cheap.
The other thing I like about it is if we use the local money, we can control our letting schedule a lot. We don't have to wait the period that it takes for the DOT to change things around. We can set that up and get things done a lot better. And the same contractor is still gonna bid the work, whether it's through the state or through a local, because we'll contact all the paving companies, know these projects are coming up. Well, all the concrete pavers, the asphalt guys, since we're in limbo yet, because we had notified them years ago that a year or two ago, that we were doing these projects, so. I like the flexibility of local letting scheduling versus DOT scheduling, but we can't let farm to market money locally, so.
Okay.
Anyway, think about it. We can have further discussions.
Now,
I see like lime kilns on, I don't know, first and last page, but it's not on the middle, but.
I pulled it out because the way the middle one worked out, we wouldn't have been able to afford it anyway, so we just kind of took it out, just to make the farm to market borrowing restrictions work.
Okay, is that road, I guess I haven't been down it in a while, but.
It's gonna need something. I mean, its surface is deteriorating, the edges are kind of falling off. I mean, it gets a lot of farm traffic coming into town. It's just gonna be due. I mean, I haven't looked at the schedule, but I'm sure it's at least 15 years old, if not more.
Once they reach a certain point, you actually start to have to patch them before you can overlay them.
Yep.
They reach a point where they just start self-destructing, and it's not that an overlay can just Band-Aid the whole thing. You actually have to do something to the base.
Well, and keep in mind, yeah, and also keep in mind, I don't have other local roads programmed in here because we've never had the money to do it, but, March Avenue down to Orchard's in tough shape. The cut across from, where was it? Is it from Orchard? I can't remember. We did the patch there. I mean, these local roads are falling apart, and we haven't even programmed any of them. Yeah.
240th.
Those haven't even been programmed because we've never had the money to program them. So those are gonna be substantial dollars also to burden the local dollars.
I know the River Road is not
And the River
a
Road,
farm road, that
that's
type
a
of
local
thing,
dollar- that's a
but it's a
local
road
project.
a lot of people use, and it's in rough shape too.
Yep. So we've got local roads we need to also take care of, but, they're not programmed, so.
Okay.
well,
So do you get money from like the fuel tax too, other than?
That's the road use tax money.
Road use tax? How much does that amount to?
I'd have to remember now. I don't know what we programmed it. The total it's over $2 million this year. I think. I can't remember what it is. I don't have
About
that.
$2 million a year? Is that what
Oh,
that-
it's more than that, but
More
I
than
can't
that?
remember exact
Yeah.
dollar amounts projected. But that money gets spent on salt,
Well,
sand,
right, for
rock,
your- yeah,
everything
to
else, everything
maintain,
else,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yep, I just wondered, yeah, I realize you have all them expenses, you know.
I'll repeat it again. We're where other counties were 10 years ago, 11 years ago. When we had TIF money, we were fixing roads. When they didn't have TIF money, they were turning them to gravel. So we're in a situation where we're not that bad yet, but I mean,
Yeah.
you gotta find funding sources to take care of the system.
Oh, yeah, yep.
well, next week we'll give you an answer, Rich.
Okay, and like I said, you guys if you guys need further, we can talk about this stuff too. It's hard to just kind of throw it at you and then try to
Right.
explain it in a board meeting, but,
Yeah.
which is where we're at, and I get it. I mean, nobody wants to borrow money, but
Yep.
I know other counties would drool at the opportunity to use TIF, so. Anyway, so
Yep.
that's that.
All right, we got down here discussion and possible action on new hire. So we've met the new hire.
No, I'll get to that. This is a new hire.
Oh.
Balsam Bridge, the abutment's been taken out. I think the north abutment still has to come out. That project kind of moved slow last week because of rain. The Bailey Bridge, that deck was poured last week. They're waiting for cure time, and then they'll start forming up the railing. And supposedly the dirt contractor's supposed to be in here trying to move some dirt. So we'll get that back. You know, that project's still going. We still got some concrete to pour yet. So then that's that for the local projects now. We're doing some patching right now, and we're doing some we're blading roads. So that's where the construction stuff's at. The new hire is the one to replace the one that left. Will be out of Osage here. We interviewed a few people. One person we interviewed decided it wasn't the right fit for them, so we, not that we offered it to them, but in conversation before we made our decision, they had contacted us and said that they were no longer interested in the position, even if we would offer it to them. So we did get, I think, Jaden Fangmeyer is the individual.
Aiden?
Jaden, yep. Got some experience in similar stuff we do. He does work for the city. So I'm going to recommend him for our new hire out of Osage.
Okay.
Anybody's got any thoughts or questions or anything like that? We'll be able to kind of hit the ground running a little bit just because it runs similar equipment and work through similar events.
And he's been with the city since he was like a senior in high school. And he's done it all. He's not afraid to get in there and get after it. Is what I've seen with the city anyway. He actually, a background, even went to diesel mechanic school, and I think he liked his job so much that I don't think he went his second year. I'm not for sure, but.
Well, just having that knowledge, I guess,
Mhm.
helps. So.
Yep. Okay.
Sounds like he'd make a good employee.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll finish the process then, and we'll keep moving.
Okay.
That's all I have for you this morning. Sorry to take so much time on that, but I think we
No,
needed to
that's
kind of
not
get
important.
this,
Well-
we need to kind of keep
No,
pushing through there.
absolutely. Yep.
Has he given you his?
I always kind of get a verbal commitment, but I say, no one ever say anything until I get your name in public, because then that's when you really need to know. So hopefully I can get to him right away so that he can let his employer know the situation. But
Okay.
once you guys approve, we are on board, yes.
Okay, do you want us to?
I don't know
make
how you guys wanna
motions
do
and
it.
You know, physically,
You have it down here as
That's because it's always been that way, I guess.
possible action.
We can do it.
If you
Let's
guys
get her
want to
done.
just do it, get it done.
Do we have any motions to approve Jaden Fangmeyer?
I'll make that motion.
Marcus made a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Jim has seconded. Any further discussion?
Roll call, Jim.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Steve.
Aye?
Mark.
Right?
Todd.
Aye.
Thank
So
you.
now you can tell him,
Yep,
and
he'll know
if he accepts.
Shortly. I'm sure we'll be good. but
Okay. Anything else, Rich?
I do not have anything. I know that, I see Adam's here, but he and I are working on his dam project, so
Okay.
the dam project is
Yeah.
moving ahead, right?
I'm sure.
Hopefully.
All right. Well, we'll move on. Number 7, approved county electronic service system, 28E agreement. And it is here. Too much to read. Rachel,
You don't need to read the whole thing.
I'm not going to read any of it.
Perfect. From my understanding, I don't have a whole lot of understanding. It does, if you go, I
But
don't know,
Mark,
pages
Mark
on-
did look at it, and he's okay with it?
You can see on page 9, this is something with all of the counties. They made some amendments, and they're just asked to have all the counties re-sign.
Okay. But Mark did give his,
Graces for it then?
I sent it to Mark.
Okay, so apparently he didn't.
kick it.
All right.
This is Mark. I haven't had a chance to fully review it yet. I skimmed over it. What I would like is the standard motion, giving the board the authority to sign it after I've had a chance to fully review it, and I should be able to get that done yet today.
Okay, we'll make that in that motion then. Do we have anyone would like to make the motion to approve the Electronic Services System 28E agreement under the approval with the county attorney's approval?
Move to approve as you've just stated.
Jim has made a motion.
I will second, just as you
Mike
stated.
has seconded. Further discussion?
Roll call, Mark,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Todd,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
Steve.
Aye. So, once Mark gives his final approval, the chair will put his final signature on it. Thank you. Items of note, meetings attended.
Had a North Iowa Juvenile Detention meeting, and they went over their budget and stuff like that. I'll just briefly mention the detention report. The residents are very challenging. They have GPS units. They have 551 of them on people for the last 3 months. The Crisis Center, they received their 3-year accreditation. Their subacute report was 2 staff were injured by clients. One was shoved and they had their shoulder worked on. The other one got punched in the face. And that resident ended up having charges filed against them and were discharged from the facility. They want to put a hallway between the gym area to the A unit, and sent out to receive 3 bids for that. And then they have an expansion project. What they want to do is they want to move their subacute to another location. The new location will have 16 beds of its own, and that'll free up beds in their existing facility for their other services that they provide for the crisis level and the youth, adult and youth people. And then there was 2080 agreement that they approved for transportation contract with Winneshiek Medical Center. They're going to start doing that. In a nutshell, that's that.
Thank you, Jim. Mike?
Oh, I had a Mitchell County Substance Abuse Coalition board meeting, and they went over, they want to do some marketing in the community, get some more involvement, and one of the main problems they felt in Mitchell County was youth tobacco and marijuana use. It's probably the #1 problem that they want to try and crack down on or educate on. And then I had a public health board meeting too, and that was last Thursday, and there was 29 active cases in the county of the corona, and they're going to start vaccinating at the Hageman building for the booster this week, and they're done with their flu vaccines, but they'll still take walk-ins. So, oh, they got a grant from Shop on State for $1,800 for CPR material, so they're happy about that. Anyway, that's pretty much the highlights.
Thank you, Mike. I had nothing.
We had a county social service meeting in Honolulu. It was just a basic meeting, went over their budgets, and they had an evaluation for all employees, and they all came back very positive, so we were happy to hear that.
I had none.
All right. Last, public comments. Is there anybody out there with public comment? Charlie? Okay, anybody out on the internet that has a public comment? Hearing none? I think the meeting's getting close to being over with. Do we have any motions to adjourn the meeting?
Move to approve adjournment.
Jim has made a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Mike has seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Meeting is over, and then we'll have another meeting here with